Class Live. We're talking about what you're talking about.
You all ready for this?
This is a sham.
No.
Nope.
Y'all, just stop.
Get real.
Ooh, officials in Georgia are gearing up for former President Trump to surrender to authorities. Welcome to DBL. I have two.
All right, we are coming in hot.
Yeah,
this
there was no
morning.
welcome to DBL, so I just immediately read it like Ron Burgundy.
Okay, and there's also a commercial playing on your phone.
No, it was on this. So I was
Okay.
trying to do two things at once. I apologize.
You handled it well.
Thank you so much. Things this time, though, could be very, very different. The Fulton County Sheriff said the former president and his co-defendants will be treated just like everyone else. He will get their mugshot, all of them, taken at the county jail. Meantime, the judge in the case said cameras will be allowed in the courtroom, but there's no official word if the trial will be televised. That's what we want to know from you, DBL Nation. What do you think? Should Trump's trial in Georgia be televised? Simple question, complicated answer. Go to dblvote.com to weigh in. Albert?
I say absolutely. How could you not? You have, I mean, he's being accused of trying to take the will of the people of Georgia away. The will of the people of Georgia said, we want this candidate. He tried to reverse that allegedly.
Correct.
So shouldn't the people have a right to see how he defends himself? Maybe he might change some minds. Now, I know that we think Trump is going to make a circus of this, but I think that that's what the judge, they didn't pick their name out of a hat. That judge is there to make sure that it doesn't become a circus, and there'll be sanctions if there are. But I think that if you do televise it, Jeff, I think that then also takes the media narrative that you hate so much away. CNN can't spin it. Fox can't spin it. It's just, here's what was said, here's what was rebutted. I think that's the way to go.
Jeff?
I'm usually with you 100%, buddy. I'm on the opposite side.
Oh, let's hear it.
1,000%. How do you think it's not going to be a circus? How do you think people aren't going to spin it? First of all, if we're going to get invaded by any country, if Trump's trial goes on television, that's the time to invade us. If you're going to assassinate somebody, that's the time. If you're going to cheat on your wife and you're a celebrity, that's the time.
Yes.
Nothing will ever make the news.
I never thought about this window of
Dude,
celebrity.
You want to start a drug business with legal unicorns doing business on the street? Now's the time. You know what I mean?
Not the unicorns.
I tried to make it like not so real. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it'd be a complete distraction. What better timing for the other side, right? For the Democratic side than to have Trump on trial. Biden, nothing he says is ever going to make the news. Nothing they say about changing laws for the 2024 election. Who should you vote for? This is all coming up. This is things America needs to know about. If the Trump trial is in the news, we are never going to hear about anything ever again. We are just going to talk about Trump every day on this show. I might do something drastic. Yeah, and I can't take. I love a good train wreck as much as I love to watch that stuff, and I love good court TV. This would be too much of a distraction for the American public.
What you're saying makes me think about, Tori, if there's, God forbid, a natural disaster, anything happens, and this show's preempted by the news, the whole world would be preempted.
Yes.
So anything that's happening,
nothing would ever be.
No,
on.
It would never see the light of day. I see your point, but I think the people need to see.
Argument versus argument. I see your point. I see your point. The answer and the winner goes definitely to Jeff, in my opinion, which is rare for me.
Oh,
Very rare for me, but I cannot.
I'm sad to lose, but I'm happy to see this.
Yeah. I can't.
What a great way to put it. Argument versus argument. That was a good,
Yeah, it's a debate.
Good roundup.
That's
of the
a good
whole
roundup. Ding, ding, ding. Moving on. All right. And we're going to keep the voting up so y'all can keep going, okay? Oh, we're not going to keep it up. I thought they wanted to keep it up the whole block. All right. Trump is responding to the latest indictment against him. Yeah, there was lies told. But once again claiming the 2020 election was rigged. So in this recent post on social media, Trump promised to release a detailed report on presidential election fraud in Georgia, which he claims is, quote, conclusive. But Georgia's Republican governor, Brian Kemp, is hitting back. He said the election was not stolen, adding, quote, for nearly 3 years now, anyone with evidence of fraud has failed to come forward under oath and prove anything in a court of law. He also insisted elections in Georgia are secure. So what do you think of Trump yet again pushing this false narrative? Will it work in his defense? Is this a smart legal move? We'll start with...
Why don't you answer?
It's the only way to go for him, right? This is his only out, is to continue doing this. My question to you guys and to you out there is, if you're a budding Republican congressman in a southern state and you're trying to get into the party, do you, as Kemp said, jump off this sinking ship and pivot? Or do you stay with what DeSantis and Pence have all done today, this morning, and said, oh, we're just going to wait? At some point, the ship is going to go down. It's kind of like the Titanic. It has hit the iceberg. He is charged with taking over democracy. And Kemp, a Republican governor, is saying it's time to jump. What do we do as a Republican to save the party? What do you do?
Well, oh, please.
You got to get your name out there. Odds are, I don't know anything about this.
The question is, how are you getting it out there?
I don't know anything about what's going to happen with Trump or anything. It doesn't look good, okay? Like, just looking at it from someone who's like, school was fun. Yeah. It doesn't look good for him. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So if you're a Republican candidate,
what do you do?
Man, you could be the next president of the United States. People are wanting a voice on that side. Step up. Do something. Don't mimic what Trump is doing. Look at where he's at. Try to get the voice of the American public in a different way. Don't try to beat up your opponent. That's Trump's game. You're not going to do it better than Trump. You got to do something to make yourself stand out. Now's the time. And throwing your hands up in the air and saying, I don't know, you got to do something to stand out. Get in there. Book that audition. You know what I mean? Right. You got to do something. Everybody looks like me at the audition. I got to do something different to get that part.
Okay.
They got to do something different to get that part.
And that means losing perhaps 30 to 37%.
And therein lies the problem, Jeff. I think that all these candidates want to do that. Everyone knows that the election appears to be, legitimate.
It is legitimate.
Yes. I don't know if we.
It is. He's being allegedly,
whatever.
But we now know that it was legitimate.
But I think what people are the thing that no one can answer is, what is the base going to do? If, let's just say, Trump goes to jail, is that base then just going to retreat into the shadows? You know that GIF of Homer walking backwards?
Into the grass.
I use it all the time.
Yeah, I use it all Is that what's going to happen with the base? Are they just not going to vote anymore? Or is that base going to be like, remember Game of Thrones, the Unsullied, that army where you could just basically buy them and move them
like
where you
mercenaries.
Want? Mercenaries. Or can Chris Christie have that base? Can Jeff Schroeder have that base? Can Al Jackson have that base? So we don't know if these people exist in real life post-Trump or not. And I think they're all the candidates are like trying to hedge their bets because they don't want to go against them, because they have an example of what happens with that. Look at Mike Pence. Mike, they brought Gallows to his office.
And he's still backing him. He's still not going
after him. Because he doesn't know.
Right.
That shows you.
But what about a spine? What about a spine?
You're a spine.
What about some
You're Asa Hutchinson. You're polling under 1%.
Maybe try
There's your
something
spine.
else. Try something else.
Well, yes, if you're under 1%, you should be my campaign manager.
I'm saying Chris Christie, who no one likes on either side, let's be real.
I love him.
We now are starting to see a different Chris Christie. He is the only Republican candidate going directly after Trump, and there's changes occurring in the Chris Christie campaign. Will he win? No. But he's making a name for himself.
Can I just say
like
this? I think Chris Christie is a Republican that could beat Biden.
Yeah.
Because he's funny. He seems like a normal person. I think this country is like.
Well, he's changing your mind, because before, 2 months ago, you wouldn't have said that.
I wouldn't. I've been following him. He's funny. He's kind of got Trump-esque, but he's not with Trump without the baggage in a way.
Right, without them.
I think he could win.
Meanness. Let's take a look. Should Trump's trial be televised? 84% of you say yes. 16% of you say no.
People love a train wreck.
Dude, I can't take this train wreck. I can't take it.
It's the biggest train wreck ever.
Maybe I'm going to take a riverboat. Coming up on DBL, our interview with a man who traveled, just like this guy, to every single country without setting foot on a plane. How did he do it? And the blindside bombshell continues with another response from the Toohey family after Michael Oher's allegations. We're going to talk about that next. Stay tuned. Okay, this is our thing. Chris Christie used to be the guy that closed the bridge. Remember George Washington Bridge, when people needed it because he was mad at his other opponent and ambulance rides couldn't get through, and it was a big thing. Then he closed the beaches, and remember, he sat himself on that beach, and they took a picture. I'm not fat shaming. I'm just calling it out. Wow. He had a famous picture that was unkind and unflattering, okay? And he looked like a king. Well, I'm trying to step it back a bit, to be honest with you.
But okay,
let me finish.
It's even worse when somebody does the body, but it does the gesticulations, but not like they're like, Jeff, you look like
But it's like, that's even more insulting.
Whatever's going on here, Al.
That's what Jeff says to me every morning. It's not good here, you know what I mean? But anyway, all of a sudden his tactic is to go like Michael Cohen. He flipped. He did left flip flop. And now he's like the Kushners. He's bringing up Ivanka. He's bringing up Trump in a funny, pop culture, digestible way, and it seems to be working for moderate Democrats and moderate conservatives.
But you know what? Like, you got to get out there, and whatever they're doing, I don't know anything what I'm talking about. But like Bernie Sanders of the world, he gets out there. He's on shows. He's on late night shows. He gets out there. You might not agree with his opinion. You know his name.
Right.
Robert Kennedy Jr. might not agree with him. He's out there. Yeah. He's on Joe Rogan's. He's doing Bill Maher's. He's out there. They got to get out there. Yeah, Pence isn't. Nobody knows. Does Pence have a dog? Does he have 2 kids? I have no idea. I know there was a fly in his hair on Saturday Night Live. That's all I know, and that's all the American public knows. You need to get out there. What's his name from Florida?
I think their handlers.
He needs to do something different.
I know. You know what he said about Disney? He says, I lay it down because I've moved on. Well, what was that all for then?
Well, go on to the show and talk about it.
Exactly.
Why did you feel that way?
Right.
Be real.
Yeah.
Don't just take this political stance and give that political. If I see a guy drinking a beer,
he really does.
Like one guy drinking a beer, like at a party, it's like. No, that's not you. Yeah.
Well, this has gotten messy. Welcome back to DBL. The Tuohy family is responding to Michael Oher's lawsuit with some shocking allegations of their own. So let's paint the story here. As we mentioned, Michael claimed the Tuohys withheld money from the film The Blind Side and tricked him into signing a document making them his conservators and not their adopted son. In a statement from their lawyer, the Tuohys called the lawsuit offensive and ridiculous. They also alleged that Michael said he would plant a negative story about them in the press unless they paid him $15 million, and that Michael is trying to just drum up attention to promote his latest book, which is coming out soon. Meantime, some people online actually want Sandra Bullock to return her Oscar for playing Leanne Tuohy in the movie. But her co-star, Quentin Aaron, who played Michael, says her brilliant performance should not be tarnished by something that has nothing to do with her. And side note, she's dealing with a partner who has just passed from ALS. She was the caretaker. That's ridiculous. Am I right? Anyone want to talk about Sandra?
Yeah.
That's
Plus,
ridiculous.
I mean, the traumatic experience of the bus thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
She's still getting over
The
that.
speed.
Yeah. No one else got that.
I did. I got it.
I looked at Al and he didn't get it. I'm like, that
It
joke's
took me a second. No, it took me a second, but
Yeah, you didn't get it and Tori did. I'm like, that joke's horrible. But
man.
I don't mean to make fun of what she's going through in real
Obviously,
life.
we're not laughing.
Obviously
Yes.
not. Yeah, but
we are laughing at the ridiculousness of this.
I do want to get to that part, right? The whole Michael Oher thing, I think more details will come out as time goes on. It's a big blur to me why all this is happening. But summer camp is over. The last 3 years were fantasy camp for people, and their fantasy thoughts got through in real life. People were fired. People that didn't deserve positions got positions in my business, maybe in your business too. Fantasy camp's over. Calling for people's Oscars that have nothing to do with the actual story. You're playing a character. It's called actor, which means you're acting to be someone. You didn't go and take on all their traits and attributes and believe everything that they thought in their mind. You're playing a character. It's a movie. I don't know what movie these Fantasyland people are living in or what they do in their real lives. Calling for people's and that we're talking about it and giving it like a heartbeat is insane. We need to stop. That the last 3 years were great. Some progress was made. It's insanity now. Insanity that we're talking about.
You agree to that?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think, Jeff, I agree that we're talking about people on the internet, and not only is what they're saying ridiculous, but it's, of course, because it's the internet, ridiculously short-sighted. I think if you're going to do this, have some fun. Make her be part of a really awkward sequel. And then just like the second one,
The
is just
Blinder side?
him suing the family, and then just all the
Like
legal
the
trouble.
whole-
Yeah, like let's really get into the reality. I would love to see the part 2 where it's just real, where he's just like, I mean, but this is, again, being serious for a second. When you look at what the family had to say, this is ridiculous and hurtful. More adjectives about emotions. When you're talking about, if I accused you of stealing money out of my account this morning, you wouldn't say, Al, I love you. That wouldn't happen. You say, no, I didn't. Whenever you've done something, you always lead with, this is ridiculous. I'm hurt. Why would you say that? Rather than just like, absolutely not. Here, look at my phone. I didn't. There's a reason that they're being evasive with their words.
How do they come out, in your minds, you're their defense attorney?
They did. It's like I always say with the Girl Scout cookies. Where's the money? You can follow money. That's how they get the internet hackers. That's how they get fraudsters. That's how they get all these crypto guys. They just follow the money. This was a movie. Money was made. We can follow where all that money went. Where's Michael's money? Why is it split equally? I didn't see any of their kids on the offensive line. Are any of their kids pulling guards? I don't think so. Why do they get any money? For staying in their room?
No, I'm
What
with
is
you,
the,
man.
so what's this equal? We're all in this together. Oh, are we?
And how about not knowing you weren't adopted till February of this year?
It just smacks of fraud, and I think this could go all the way down to like Ole Miss. This seems like a funneling program to get a kid into your school.
Interesting.
He was a first-round draft pick. He could have gone to college somewhere, I think.
Wow, there's some legs here. We're going to update you when we know, coming up on DBL. We're talking with a man who took an epic journey around the world without flying. You don't want to miss his inspirational story. That's coming up next.
More than 3.7 million people hold Parent Plus student loans, federal loans that parents can take out to help their child pay for college. We recently verified that those loans were excluded from the Biden administration's new income-driven repayment plan known as SAVE, which will forgive some student loan borrowers' balances after between 10 and 25 years of payments. Verify viewer Terry asked us if there are other loan forgiveness programs available for Parent Plus borrowers. And using these sources, we can verify that yes, there are. But there's a catch. Federal Parent Plus loans have to be consolidated in order to qualify for forgiveness under these other federal programs. Let me break down your options. First is the Income Contingent Repayment Plan, or ICR. Under this program, qualified borrowers can have their monthly student loan payments reduced based on their income and family size. ICR plans cap monthly payments at 20% of your discretionary income, or offer fixed payments based on a 12-year loan term, whichever is lower. And after making payments for 25 years, any remaining debt will be forgiven, according to the Education Department. Another option is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, or PSLF. To qualify, the Education Department says Parent Plus borrowers must work full-time in a qualifying public service job. The student loans must be consolidated into a direct loan, and those loans must be repaid under an ICR plan. After making 10 years' worth of payments, totaling 120 payments, any remaining debt is forgiven. To apply for the Income Contingent Repayment Plan or the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, go to studentaid.gov. With your Verify, I'm Ariane Till.
Welcome back. Thor Peterson is a world traveler like you've never seen before. Earlier, we spoke with him and heard all about his decade-long adventure. It's incredible. Take a look.
If you think you've traveled a lot, chances are Torbjorn Thor Peterson has you beat.
I was born in Denmark in '78. I've just always had a keen interest in travel. And Europe is small, and if you want to go skiing, you can't really do it in Denmark. Then you travel through Germany, you go to Austria, you go to Italy, you go to Switzerland.
Several tours in the military and a job in logistics sent Thor to many new places.
I worked a year in Bangladesh, I worked in Kazakhstan, in Azerbaijan, I worked in the Arctic Circle, I worked in Greenland, I worked in Florida, worked in a number of European countries.
But 10 years ago, he embarked on an incredible journey to visit every country in the world without flying.
Well, it all began with an email from my father back in January 2013. And I read about people who had gone to every country in the world. And I wasn't even aware you could do such a thing. I discovered that no one had done it completely without flying. And for me, that was pretty big.
With a budget of $20 a day, Thor was on his way, relying on the kindness of strangers across the globe, and sometimes putting his life in danger.
Someone puts a gun in your face, and there is danger when you don't know. When you're on a bus, but you have no idea about how the bus has been serviced, if the brakes are working, what the condition is of the tires. I had cerebral malaria, so that's a parasite that goes in your body and it goes to your brain. And that could have been the end of me within a couple of days without treatment.
Now he's back home in Copenhagen, safe and sound, until the next challenge comes his way.
Unbelievable. Please welcome to the show, Thor Peterson.
Unbelievable, Thor. Now, I have to ask you this. Did you do anything mentally to prepare you for certain spots, knowing I'm not going to be able to fly to them? Did you get yourself in a mode?
Yes, I did that exactly. And then I was ready. I've had a life full of travel. My parents stem from 2 different countries, Denmark and Finland. There was a lot of going back and forth between the borders, and we lived in Canada for a bit and in the US. So I grew up sort of across different, intercontinentally, I guess you'd say, and then eventually I grew up to have an interest in the world, and I would travel whenever I could. I got a job within shipping and logistics, and I worked in various countries around the world, Bangladesh and Libya, Kazakhstan, in the Arctic Circle, and so on. So all of that sort of built up to be a sense of preparation to all of this. I served in the military for 3 years and on a mission abroad as well. And so, yeah, I've always been interested in cultures and the world and people and what's around the corner.
Thor, I'm super jealous. I'm sure you have thousands of stories I'd love to hear. But one of them, you arrived in Hong Kong right before the pandemic, and you ended up staying there for 2 years. Obviously, you weren't prepared to stay somewhere this long. What did you do?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I didn't know. If I had arrived and someone could have shown me the future and said, this is it for the next 2 years, then I would have headed to the airport. It would have been over. But there was always hope in front of me.
Yes. Okay, so what was the most unexpected mode of transportation you used during your travels?
Oh, there's been so much transportation in the entire world, and it's been almost a decade. But in more recent years, I got to go on board a tugboat, and that was brilliant because that was kind of a childhood dream. I don't know if I might have had a book when I was a kid with a little tugboat with big eyes and a big smiley mouth, but it was great getting on board a tugboat, just the word tugboat. But it wasn't as comfortable as I was hoping. It was sort of like bobbing around in every direction.
Crushing any story at a house party.
He wins.
Wanders
This
by.
guy. This guy.
I know. I feel like Jeff is teary-eyed because that's his dream.
Dude, I'm like in preschool with my travels compared to this guy.
You two have a lot of similarities. Thor, thank you so much for joining us today. DBL Nation, be sure to follow Thor on Instagram at Once Upon a Saga to see what he's up to and where he'll go next. Thanks again. Congratulations on all your travels and success. We'll be right back. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nearly 100 people dead, a community with centuries of tradition destroyed. The Maui fires are among the most catastrophic in American history. As many people look to see how they can help, we've been getting some questions about online donation platforms. Namely, does GoFundMe take a cut of the donations? Several of our viewers wanted to know, so let's verify. Our sources are GoFundMe and Charity Watch. The answer is yes, GoFundMe takes a cut of donations. For each donation to a fundraiser, the company automatically deducts a 2.9% transaction fee plus an additional 30 cents. So if you and 14 friends each donated $100 to a fundraiser, of the $1,500 total dollars, 1,452 would go to the cause and 48 would go to fees. A lot of that money goes to covering the cost of securely processing the transactions. Some of it goes to just growing GoFundMe's business, since it is a for-profit company. Lori Styron, the executive director of Charity Watch, told us these fees aren't out of the ordinary. Maintaining the programming and security necessary to process transactions safely and to protect a donor's data is expensive, so charging reasonable fees to provide such services is justified, she said. Other crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Facebook typically charge similar fees. With your Verify, I'm Casey Decker.
Are you skeptical of headlines and what you see on social media? We are too. The Verify newsletter helps you distinguish between true and false information by answering your questions. It provides fast facts on trending topics, spotlights major stories, and even includes a daily fun fact for all those trivia buffs out there. Get Verify's fast facts delivered every weekday to your email inbox. Go to verifythis.com/email to check it out.
Verify here with your fast fact. This viral video with more than 1 million views claims to show 3 UFOs flying over New Mexico and asks, do you believe the footage? So let's verify. Is this video real? These are our sources. Verify took a few frames from the viral video and ran them through a reverse image search. This led us to both TikTok and Instagram videos posted on July 31st by user IcemanFox1 with the caption, filmed with Digital Combat Simulator. DCS is a video game that offers realistic simulations of aircraft and other military equipment. IcemanFox1's profile says they regularly post realistic DCS videos and confirmed in an email to Verify that the viral video was generated using DCS. So no, this video claiming to show UFOs in the sky over New Mexico is not real. With your fast fact, I'm Brandon Lewis.
Welcome back. Joint pain doesn't have to mean putting an end to activities you love. There are tons of hobbies that have little to no stress on your joints. It's time for some joint and muscle support brought to you by Omega XL. First, I was hoping they'd say this. Knitting and crocheting can improve dexterity, reduce stress, and improve focus. Stop laughing. You can even use an ergonomic needles that cause less pain. Next up, gardening. This can really help with mobility and flexibility. Leslie, cooking. This could be a great hobby to pick. I do cook. You can make balanced anti-inflammatory meals to reduce joint pain. Omega XL has improved the lives of millions of consumers, supported by 30 years of clinical research. Omega XL's powerful and proven benefits have transformed the lives of athletes, celebrities, and dedicated daily users. So call 1-800-725-2612 or visit OmegaXL.com for more information.
I think I might get down with that.
You will understand.
My oldest son, I feel like he needs to strengthen his hands, and I think if I started doing that, he would do it. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people that tap their foot and stuff like that. I think it's good for nervous energy.
You go
That's
into the
absolutely
flow.
Never going to happen.
See you guys tomorrow.